Okay, so welcome everyone. This is a special session relating to the payments addressing workstream, um, and it's going to be led by the joint leaders of this workstream. That's Clare, Rowley, and Arunjay Katakam. It's aimed at gathering requirements for this workstream. So I'm hoping they're going to set out their thoughts on where this workstream will go, and then that people on this call will be adding extra requirements or perhaps reducing some of those requirements, essentially focusing it to make sure it meets the needs of the modular community. There are clear intersections with the inter-scheme workstream and cross-border payments in general. And it's important to note that this isn't limited just to merchant payments, it's everything related to cross-border transactions. So please give the benefit of your experience whenever you feel able. I'll hand over now to Claire and Arunjay to lead this, and then we'll go into Q&A at the end of the presentations. So Claire, Arunjay, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Maybe just to make a short introduction, Arunjay, if that's okay for yourself first, and I would just introduce myself and Glyph team, and then I turn over to you, Arunjay. So I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to introduce also this legal entity identifier and our first thoughts for how to advance the collaboration together. My name is Clare Rowley. I'm managing the business operations at Glyph. And then I have with me today two of my colleagues, Ololade and Dinesh. And I turn Lola, if you'd like to make a quick introduction, and also Dinesh.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ololade. I'm a business relationship manager here at Glyph, and it's very nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dinesh. I'm a project manager with Clive. It's nice to meet you all.
And then over to you, Arunjay, for your introduction.
Thanks a lot, Claire. Yeah, this is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to this work stream and PI. I've been in financial inclusion for about 15 years, spent 5 years at the GSMA, worked at a bunch of inclusive fintechs in between, and the last 4 years at UNCDF. I've been part of the Mojo Loop community for the last 3-4 years as well. It's been really interesting to see how the ecosystem has progressed, and particularly been working on cross-border payment addressing, proxy alias resolution for the last 3-4 years as well, and yeah, looking forward to finally solving it.
Excellent. So, Arunjay, we have a suggestion for the agenda today. I have a short introduction of what is this legal entity identifier, and then that would be roughly 10 minutes, and then to Arunjay for the PI26 workstream definition, and to walk through a bit what we aim to achieve, also some of the work that he is doing. So if everybody agrees, we could move forward like this. And of course, we are very welcoming to having the questions throughout, but we like to ensure we have roughly to 40 minutes at the end for questions.
Okay, that sounds great, Claire. So please go ahead.
So, thank you, Paul. Let me to share my screen here. Of course, I have to choose the right screen. This one. Okay. And does everybody see a slide titled Empowering Business Globally, One Verifiable Identity at a Time? Excellent.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to make a short introduction of what is this legal entity identifier broadly, and then bringing it into payments. So if we start with the introduction here, we always ask the question, well, what is an identifier? Well, an identifier is not something for you or I, for the human beings. An identifier is something for a machine. It's a tool that enables machine-to-machine communication, and you could consider it like the signpost that enables digital communication. So this here shows identifiers coming from all over the world, from what we call the registration authority, so the giver of the local identity. And now let's take one of these identifiers and let's make it come to life. And you see here, by connecting that local identifier, the company registries, the Corporate Affairs Commission in Nigeria, to the LEI code, which is up here as the international passport, you see how suddenly this company, Bacardi Martini Nigeria Limited, it comes alive in a structured data format. In this case, it is a larger organization. So you see the basics here. We don't have the full snapshot, but you would have the address, you would have the metadata about the validation verification of the entity. And because it is a larger organization, you also have parent information. And then you have the same exact structured data format. So you start to see how this concept, the identifier as a signpost to enable digital communication, it can be used to communicate in a structured data way about an entity, and then even start to connect the dots where entities are related to each other. I mentioned this registration authority. So we saw on the previous page the Corporate Affairs Commission of Nigeria as an example of a registration authority. But what we do at Glyph is we provide this global passport, this legal entity identifier, but always linking it down to the local registration authority. So we maintain something that might be interesting, especially to the Moja Loop community, but this is for every jurisdiction in the world, as much as information as we have been able to discover in 10 years of who is the local giver of identity. So this could be a company register, a charity register, a fund register, a trust authority, etc. But I just took an extract here for some of the countries in Africa. But if you like, we also can give you the link to the information you find with each one of these registries, a structured code, and then some informations here, like you see the international name, a local name if it's in a different language, etc., of the particular register. We also maintain something with this called the regex. So it's where a registry also has a standard format of a code, the regex that goes with it. So you can then rationalize, is this an identifier coming from the registry? But moving forward, so what are we as the foundation of providing this global passport? We are a not-for-profit Swiss foundation, and we were established now 10 years ago by the Financial Stability Board. So we came the concept of this legal entity identifier, and then we as the foundation come from the G20 and the Financial Stability Board, looking to overcome the barrier of entity identification in financial transactions. So we have a very deep connection to the regulatory community. We are overseen by something called a Regulatory Oversight Committee, which includes 65 regulators coming from around the world, 19 observers, and this is representing 50 countries. We have already some representation coming from Africa, Nigeria, Angola, Rwanda as well. We are also overseen by an independent board of directors that manages us as the foundation. And one of the key services that we do is accrediting those organizations for issuing LEIs. So ensuring that the organizations that issue LEIs, they know how to validate, verify data, and are a local authority on what gives an entity its identity locally. Today, we have more than 2.6 million LEIs that are issued. All of this data is open public data available on our website and accessible via API, full file download, in addition to the website search, which is a convenient search for us, the humans. So just to recap there, you have the LEI as being this globally interoperable passport number for entities. So it's a complement to the national business registration number. Just like for persons, there is sometimes national IDs, but then the passport for anything cross-border. The LEI is widely used in financial instruments transactions around the world. So there is more than 200 regulations around the world that make reference to the LEI for counterparty identification. Mostly it is in structured securities markets, OTC derivatives, etc. But you do find it, for example, in China customs, which requires the LEI for imports from 29 countries. So you see already a bit of expansion to areas outside the standard financial markets. But if we turn and we look here in Africa, we see that the LEI has a very low population. So as of apologies, the date is out of date there, but as of recently, there was only 12,000 active LEIs across the whole African continent. We do have 3 African domiciled LOUs, CSCS Nigeria, Tunisia Clearing, and then Strait, which is a central depository in South Africa. We do have 6 LOUs in addition to those that are domiciled in Africa to provide services, those being listed here, Bloomberg, GS1, London Stock Exchange, etc. And we have a monthly growth rate of LEIs at 1%. So we know we have more work to do to expand the use of the LEI in Africa, which is why we are very excited to engage in this community. Looking forward, why is it interesting in particular to engage with the Moja Loop community? Well, we believe that very similar to personal identity, corporate identity or business identity is an important foundational infrastructure to enable business. And we see here a quote coming from the Bank of International Settlements that describes corporate digital identity as a foundational for operational efficiency, market integrity, and importantly, financial stability and inclusion. So often corporations, they have a local business number, but of course these systems are not standardized and interoperable. And that is why the BIS identifies the LEI as a sounder starting point for a global, unique, and identified standard for entities. Moving to payments, we've had quite a lot of momentum in the last year for identifying the value of the LEI and payments. We highlight here 3 of the organizations, Bank for International Settlements, the Financial Stability Board, and also FATF and Recommendation 16. So the idea being that the LEI as a globally interoperable identifier could enhance straight-through processing, reduce costs, and also promote inclusion through transparency. And then we do already have the LEI in certain countries and regions. So just noted here, Bank of England, European Union, China CIPS, the Interbank Payment System, and also the Reserve Bank of India. But with this project, we look to expand the LEI within the Moja Loop community as a facilitator in merchant registries. We don't know exactly what this will look like, so we've just taken here a snapshot of the blueprint for the Moja Loop hub coming from the documentation available. And clearly we see that where we've discussed so far with Paul, the use of the LEI is here on the merchant registry. So bringing the transparency to the entities that are onboarded and then integrated into the payment networks. But of course, you don't just want to integrate the LEI here. It's so that it could be passed across different digital interactions to bring the efficiencies associated with transparent entity identification and straight-through processing. So it could be that the LEI could be more used and referenced in other areas. Maybe it's within the account lookup service, the central ledger database. But of course, we do not have the answers here. And this is why we are very pleased to start this collaboration to learn more about what you are doing and then where the LEI could complement the existing infrastructures, et cetera, to help drive towards their goals of interoperability, of straight-through processing, of greater transparency. Arunjay, I'm going to turn over to you then to make the introduction of some of your work and maybe focus more to the to the work in the work stream.
Sure. Thanks so much, Claire. Yeah, that's really fascinating in how the LEI can play such an important role. As you know, I'm a big fan of the LEI, and so looking forward to this as well. So I think, one of the things by adopting the LEI for merchant payments across the board, whether it's cross-border or domestic, allows us to create a situation where merchants can transact cross-border seamlessly in the future, and I think that's key to baking it in from the start. Moving a little bit towards the sort of the person-to-person side, here the goal is the same way. I mean, mobile money already today uses a proxy and an alias to identify end users, and so the goal that what we really want to see is cross-network usage of alias or proxy. So that will enable everyone to make seamless payments. So today, if you're on the same network, it kind of works, but if you have to go across networks, it becomes problematic. So I'm going to share a screen here, and so here's the workstream definition, and I think this is something we'll go through. So I just start us off here. So in terms of the first objective for the PI is to really define a comprehensive addressing framework for payments that cover both merchant and other cross-border payments, which include person-to-person. So that would be the first objective. The second is then to explore a pilot of the LEI-based merchant payments, and within that there are a few subpoints. The third is then a pilot between potentially a merge loop and the BIS project Fuse. This is yet to be confirmed, but as I call it on our Christmas wish list. And the fourth is then to identify the role of the VLEI. So the VLEI is verifiable credentials that are derived from the LEI itself and then can be used to sign transactions and any piece of data, really. So those are the objectives. I guess we can cover the acceptance criteria and meeting schedule, etc. But I'll take a pause here because our intent is to collect feedback and co-create and refine some of these objectives as well. So yeah, let's open it to the floor now.
Okay, does anyone have any comments they'd like to make on this, in particular around these objectives? Do we feel that these objectives meet the goals of the Mojaloop Foundation and the Mojaloop community? I'm seeing a bit of chat about using VLEIs as a signing key. Can we raise that, please? Because I think that's a really important point. We need to discuss that. Michael or James, would one of you like to vocalize your concerns?
I wouldn't say concern. It was just I've not previously been aware of the VLEI, and I was just interested by what Arunjay said there, that it can be derived from an LEI and used to sign any pieces of data. So immediately it struck me that we in the Mojaloop world we have JWS signatures on all our messaging protocols, and it just occurred to me that it might be possible in some way to use the VLEI as part of that message signing key.
Arunjay, would you like to? Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
And the power really is when it comes to interoperability. So similarly, what I was saying using an LEI for a merchant in a domestic situation is not really game changing, but it really is when it comes to cross-border, and by embedding it with everyone, then you get this benefit later, because you never know which merchants are going to do cross-border or not. And then here, the same thing is if you adopt the VLEI, as the VC to sign all of the transactions and everything, then when Mojaloop integrates with other payment systems, then these signatures are interoperable, like much easier to go up the trust registry and confirm who's signing them and all of these good things. So it really is about interoperability for me.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the key point, Arunjay. I think just replacing what we have, which works perfectly well now, in the particular context of a modular loop payment or modular loop discovery process would not really bring any benefits. I think the key point here is the interoperability across that. I mean, I think I said at the beginning there's synergies with the inter-scheme work stream. So this is where it comes in, because this is about the signing across schemes, so including non-modular loop schemes.
Yeah,
Is it
absolutely, Paul.
not?
And it's just laying the foundation for it.
Yeah, yeah. I see a couple of hands up. Paul, you were first. Paul Baker.
Yes, just two quick questions. The first one is, I do like LEIs, but are they supported in all the countries and regions that we are expecting modular loop to function? So how heavily can we rely on this method? And then the second one is something that came up in the ISO work stream was making use of external ISO codes as types of identifiers. And do we still so the idea is, let me just provide a bit of context. Currently, we to initiate a discovery, we make a get parties call on the party's endpoint, a get call on the party's endpoint, and we refer to it using two sort of parameters. The one is the type, the type of key, and then the second one is there's an opportunity for a sub ID. And there is a question mark on whether those types should be for ISO 20022 compatibility. Should those types be aligned with the ISO external codes? And I suppose that's and would there be any value in doing that change? And should we then support both the MSISDN types as well? And currently the sub IDs are considered to be a subdivision of that. So essentially a way of defining uniqueness. I must admit, I thought that this work stream would deal with the uniqueness problem as well, which is really about if there is an identifier that that has been specified, we need a way of ensuring that it is unique within how it's been specified. So LEIs are great if they supported and is really a good solution to this problem. But there might be more immediate needs if the LEI isn't supported everywhere and agree to where we might need to specify identifiers, and we need a simple way of making sure that it is easy to be compatible. So in other words, are we making use of supported identifiers in the ecosystem? Also, how not all of the identifiers are what we would like in modular loop. So how would we navigate that to guide them towards identifiers that we do want to support? Well, which identifiers do we? I think we want to support all identifiers, but which identifiers are our preferred set of identifiers? Yeah, sorry, there's a big discussion there, and I don't really want to have it now, but I think it's important to have yeah, I don't know if I think a lot of these have already been addressed. So maybe it's just around clarifying it, how it would work in the inter-scheme environment. Sorry, these are not clear thoughts. So I hope it came enough clearing.
Paul, maybe I just give a first reaction,
Yeah.
just quickly addressing, is the LEI available in all the regions? So I mentioned so the LEI is accessible and available to any entity that would be considered a legal entity according to the local jurisdiction. We have talked with Paul about different tiers of merchants, some which would be registered, for example, in a local business registry, others which would not. And the global system does offer flexibility, even for recognizing entities that are not in officially a business registry. Now, the question is how to get LEIs for these entities. And this is where we have, as part of the pilot, that point B, 2B, LEI registration for small merchants. So what could it look like for a merchant an operator of a merchant registry to generate LEIs as a result of their onboarding due diligence procedures when bringing on merchants to the registry? That would be part of this pilot to understand what could it look like. And then I think on the second point regarding structured identifiers, the LEI is recognized under the format of ISO 20022. I can just share you here very quickly, just another screenshot. This is just coming from a presentation that I have with European Payments Council, but it's the same content. So you see here under org ID, there is a structured tag for LEI that's already recognized within ISO 20022. And you could say that is what makes the LEI very interesting as a structured identifier. So of course, the local registry and the local number is a very important piece of information when it's available for an entity, but there is no way to standardize on local registry identifiers, formatting, lengths, etc. But with the LEI and its recognition in ISO 20022 and it being an ISO standard, you then can standardize on the 20-digit codes and the check digit sum to confirm it's a valid LEI, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm aware of its status in the ISO 20022 messages, and that's one of the reasons why I like this message a lot. It's good to know that there is some support in the regions that we're considering, at least, and more being thought about that, because I think that is the problem we need to resolve. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. James, your hand is up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Just gathering my thoughts based on what Paul Baker just said. Okay, so if I'm a merchant, and I have a business, I'm assuming that, well, at least in Europe, I'm not sure how things work in some parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, for example. But if I want to operate a business, I have to register with some local authority. And it strikes me that that's the point, kind of when you get your tax registration numbers and all that kind of stuff. At least that's how it kind of works in the UK. When you register a business, you get a business identification number, and then you register for tax and you get a tax identification number. So it strikes me that would be the most logical point for a business to seek getting an LEI, or for a regulatory domain to say that when you register a business, you get an LEI generated for you. And the point where they become a merchant of a mobile money company or at a bank, somebody acquires them at a merchant, that seems like a less appropriate point to generate an LEI for them. Are we thinking that as part of this pilot, we'll do that for merchants, separate to any other interaction they might have with local authorities? I realize I might not have been very clear in what I said there. Apologies.
James, I give just an initial feedback. So indeed, there are already within the global LEI system some business registers or national statistical institutes that issue LEIs. Currently, they are only in the European continent. But you could say, so in the future of the growth of the global LEI system, indeed, deeper collaboration with the National Registration Authority is one path we pursue today. I just give one example. The government of Bhutan works with us right now to issue LEIs and VLEIs to all Bhutanese organizations. But the important thing to remember with business registration is that this is a government decision. So business registries are not free to engage generally in initiatives unless the core legislation that manages it is changed. Just to give you the feeling, for example, in the EU, where I mentioned we have certain business registries that issue the LEI, if they were to broaden it to the full population, you would have to have something called the EU Company Law Directive, would have to have a textual modification to recognize this as a service, et cetera, et cetera. So working with business registries is a very structured engagement because it requires certain law changes, which is why when the system was initially introduced, it was the facilitators of the specific financial marketplaces that provided the LEI services. So you find names like Bloomberg that we saw on a slide, you find central securities depositories, et cetera. And this is why when we look at pavements and pivoting to the broader usage of the LEI in payments, we also look to the service providers as a possible source of attributing the LEI. We are doing some engagements on the African continent with also the national registrations bodies, but sometimes it is even just a reality. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, but sometimes these, for example, business registries, they have very limited digital capabilities and they have very little money for enhancements, et cetera. So we look for two different options. Is it a service provider or could it be that actual source of the local identity that could attribute the LEI? But here we specifically look to the service provider option with the pilot of the LEI based in merchant payments, and that point to be LEI registration for small merchants via the merchant registry. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Claire. Are there any other questions for anyone?
So I just want to add to Paul Baker's point. I've actually added it here. I saw it in the definition of a comprehensive addressing framework, and we would cover the uniqueness and duplicate alias resolution. And then I also added the types of identifiers supported. So you can kind of see it falling into this bucket here.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Arunjay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have loads of questions, but I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place to ask them.
I think you're not going to find a better place to ask them.
Okay,
No,
so
please go ahead.
well, if I'm going to go back to first principles here because apologies, I've not before the discussion at the Mojalik convening recently in Kigali, I'd not come across the LEI system before. What's for a country, a central bank, regulators in that country, what are the advantages to me legislating such that all the businesses in my country have LEIs and use them as part of cross-border payments? What are the wins? What are the incentives?
Tax.
I know what you mean. I know who's trading.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Indeed, it could be one. If we just look at FATF recommendation 16, where the LEI is referenced there, transparency. So knowing who are the entities, well, just having clear transparency in the originator beneficiary of payments, well, this allows for greater access. So that gives greater confidence in the underpinning due diligence that has been applied to enable a payment. It also allows for clear messaging across from the originator to the beneficiary of the intended beneficiary for a payment, which allows for easier screening, faster processing, etc. And so generally the themes that you see in the G20 cross-border payments work, enhancing straight-through processing, reducing costs, and broadening inclusion through transparency in the involved entities.
I don't see the benefit for inclusiveness there. Could you maybe explain that in a little bit more detail? How does this increase inclusion?
Indeed. So one would be, and maybe Arunjay, I don't have to take all the words, so also I turn to you next. So by using the LEI as the clear identifier, it is possible to immediately discover, for example, who is the beneficiary of a payment from a legal entity perspective, rather than text and fuzziness. So it's a question of the ability to conduct due diligence to know, well, who is the originator, who is the beneficiary, and then removing some of the fuzziness associated with text names. And then also, for example, screening false positives for links to sanctions, etc. All of this gets removed by the use of a clear and precise identifier rather than relying on vague representations of a beneficiary, which would be a name, a text string.
Okay, I can see how that might help regulators. But if I'm a very poor person, how does that help me? I'm sure that I have a bit more certainty that I'm not sending my money to the wrong person or to a fraudster.
Please, Arunjay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think on the level of the bottom, sorry, I just rephrase that. So LEIs, I think, are very powerful and came out of the financial crisis, and it's really to stop systemic risk. And so that, if you look at it that way, it benefits everyone on this planet, because if you can stop a financial crisis, then that's a positive thing. So I just kind of wanted to say that on the top. The second thing, from a regulator point of view, just to add one more piece to why it benefits regulators and therefore also broader society, is the ultimate beneficiary owners, which is today very opaque in most countries. And with the LEI, again, with the parent-sibling relationship, which cascades all the way down, you get to see who the ultimate beneficiary owners are. And it's actually quite early in this 10-year journey because of all of the vested interest and the lobbies and all of that. And it's been great amount of progress is made, and that's laid the foundation for the next set of progress to be made in countries actually putting this, mandating that you've got all of that. So James, in the UK today, the issue is you have all of these opaque companies set up in Companies House. You can actually go set one up on the name of Mickey Mouse, and you will get a company created. So that helps not just the regulators, but the population at large, because of all the financial consequences as a result of it. So coming down,
if I can scam the system by registering a fake name with Companies House as a director, or get somebody to volunteer, I pay somebody to register as being a director, which is one of the issues we have in the UK.
Yeah.
Why can't that happen with the LEI system?
So it's not the LEI system alone, but it's also we need reform at the Companies House, in the UK. That's in the pipeline. So when all of the pieces come together, you can actually triangulate and stop a lot of fraud or financial crime. But one thing on its own doesn't. And come back to that BIS quote that it's not a silver bullet, it's a silver lining. And it really lays the platform in which others, if they adopt and create the right regulations around it, can use it as a tool, to stop a lot of the nefarious activities.
If it's a silver lining.
Can I add a few things as well? Like,
I'm still not seeing a strong argument for its benefit to inclusivity, except that makes regulators' lives easier. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
they
Can
don't.
I
I'll come
give it
back
a
to you
go?
on that, James. We'll have a
Can-
few more questions and come back to that.
Can I give it a go perhaps as well, right? Like, because to be fair, like we've been exploring the concept of LAI, but also UTC. And if you and fundamentally this seems the same concept, right? If basically you are a merchant and nobody has a way to identify you across border, how are they gonna make a payment to you, right? Like say, like, you want to use a small provider in a remote country or a rural like, provider. If you have no way to guaranteeing that you're paying this person, it's going to create some challenge. And ultimately, like you will find a different provider that that effectively, like, you'll be able to make a payment to. So I think it's one of the example. To be fair, like I feel at this stage, like it's going back to the level of merchant, right? But this concept of if you take this from a macro level, this concept of having a unique identifier that, like, allow you to be recognized, it's actually extremely powerful to increase your marketplace overall. And also the second thing is, again, if you know that this entity can be trusted, then you can also use this for value-added use cases, right? And not the LEI is looking at this, but UTC is looking at this in the context of microloans and how do you increase like your pool of provider. So that would be one thing. And I think earlier, like, you ask what the purpose of like, usage of LEI. If you look, for example, of the UK mandating this is related to fraud prevention as well. Again, how do you guarantee that you're paying the right person? By knowing that this is a trusted credential. And to your point, like, regarding why, like, would we trust LEI above, like, another identifier? That's why there are, like, people registering LEI and being granted as an LEI registry. So effectively, you can trust that they will do the due diligence required to actually make sure that this credential is worth trusting.
Yeah, but if I can con the UK Companies House system, what's to stop me conning the LEI system? I'm not, just it strikes me as just another identifier. Sorry, I'm not seeing the difference.
And maybe, James, just one comment there. So the one word, and I think, Julie, this is exactly, it is that we use, it is discovery. So similar, if a person can't be discovered, a person is not going to get access to services. Well, it's a similar, if a business cannot get discovered, a business is going to have a very limited ability to sell, to have access to maybe tools to help it grow, like possibly credits, even small credits. So the global LEI system enables discovery. Now, to your point, if you have fraud at the initial registry, well, yes, that could perpetuate to the global system, but it gives a chance. So it gives a chance via analytical tools that looks for strange patterns across very high volumes of transactions, but even at the individual level. So imagine if, even like you said, an execution using very limited technology, but some digital execution of a payment where the use of that LEI could bring back immediate data elements to tell the payer, the entity initiating the payment, when was this company created? How many times has the address changed in the last month, 6 months, year? Some basic information that today doesn't exist. It's not, I think somebody had said it, it's not the silver bullet, but it's the silver lining. It's a step towards giving information to a consumer, an initiator of a payment, but then also giving the possibility of discovery, where today that doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you have your hand up. Please do.
Yeah, okay. Maybe just more a statement rather than a question. So LEIs, I think, in the modular loop context, it can solve quite a large problem that we got. So essentially, um, a, a transaction through modular loop is an end-to-end transaction between the participant organizations. And there's a certain amount of trust that they have if that organization is in another country, and you don't understand that country very well. How are you going to trust it? And there's a certain obligation that you need to meet around checking that you are happy to transact with that organization, from the FATFA regulations and other regulations. So I think the LEI attached to participant organizations is the biggest benefit, sort of the lowest hanging fruit an LEI can give the modular loop switch. But that's not payment addressing. Payment addressing is taking that one step further and saying, well, let's do that for merchants. And I like that move, but we shouldn't lose sight of that first step, which is if we just make all participants LEI registered and have a way of exchanging that in the modular loop system and allowing each organization to be able to query this publicly queryable legal database of these organizations. I think that largely eliminates a lot of the uncertainty in cross-border and inter-scheme messaging. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And I think that makes a lot of sense, which we've been trying to advocate for that for a while as well. So what it would do, that you would have, it would just replace the identifier that you currently have, which would be effectively a proprietary identifier within the modular loop system that identifies each of the participants. And that gets replaced by the LEI of the participant. And therefore, whilst that doesn't change anything, it's the same discussion we had on the VLEI. It doesn't change anything on the modular loop system. It just enables it for interoperability when it goes across scheme. So absolutely, it's something that needs to happen. Great. So I think this has been a fascinating discussion. We have another 9 minutes left. I'd like to shift a little bit from kind of the merchant side of it to the person side of it. We've had a lot of discussion on the on P2P transactions, aliases, proxies around, and the uniqueness, duplication problems, etc. Anyone kind of wanted to speak to that, and particularly, can I also ask people who haven't spoken yet to also kind of chime in? Yeah, would be great.
Okay, does anyone have any comments on that? Okay, so maybe we can shift the discussion then. Sorry, go ahead, Arunjay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, we can, sorry, yeah, it's fine. Go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say we don't have much time left.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could move to talking about how we want to progress this work stream and the work plan.
So I think what I had in mind was like we would schedule the next set of calls. So I saw a message from Simeon this morning that this week would be the last for the work stream calls. So really we were thinking that to have it every Monday, and we're looking ideally at the afternoon. Simply because if we do get participation from the BIS, their Project Fuse is based in Toronto, and to accommodate the time zone. So I think we will confirm their participation, and then B, a time after we've got that. But in any case, so we'll aim to do this by the end of this week, with calls then starting in January, to progress the work stream.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yes. If it's late in the afternoon, for example, some key people will not be able to attend. I'm thinking Julie, for example, in Singapore.
Yeah.
And anyone from VitsaWorks who wants to take an interest would find it hard as well. I was wondering.
Absolutely. So I think we're aiming for 1 p.m. UTC, or even if we can do 12 p.m. if they're
No,
willing.
I've just seen Michael asking for it to be after 1500 if it's a Monday. Could we
Oh no,
perhaps
12
think
or
of
1 is fine. It's just that there are a number
Okay.
of meetings that occur between 2 and 3 on a Monday.
Okay, so 12 or 1 then would be fine. Absolutely. And
Okay.
Steve, I think what you've just made is a really good point in the comments. Can you please say it so that we can all hear, please?
I'm hoping I have a good enough connection to say it. That's why I put it there. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, listening to this conversation, there are so many hub operators and central banks that I wish were in the room for this whole conversation. But if it's hard for us because we get so many proposals, it's hard for us to just say to people, hey, do you want to be a part of this project? If you guys put together a pitch deck or even just a 2-pager, 1-pager that says, this is the advantage of LEI, this is what we're trying to demonstrate.
Okay. Clearly, Steve.
We have like whatever the
clearly
specific
Steve's,
pitch is, if you just put it in writing. Go ahead.
Steve, you're dropping
Go
out.
ahead.
I was just going to say your connection isn't good enough. So just to say that Steve and the go-to-market team will be very happy to talk to potential adopters and work on developing a pilot. So we just need a 2-page pitch essentially, and we can take it from there, or Steve and his team will. Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, so we're close to time now. I don't know, Arunjay, have you decided on a time for the meeting?
We're aiming for 12 or 1 p.m. and I know that Clare has bi-weekly clash, so we might have to just alternate them or do some, play with it.
Yeah, alternate them is fine, provided we make it clear on the Slack channel when the meeting is happening.
Actually, that's a great point. So hopefully everyone on this call is on the workstream Slack channel, and if not, please do join, because I guess that's where we will kind of send out the updates.
Yeah, and I'll just put the Slack channel name on the group chat here. So please join if you're interested in monitoring or contributing to this workstream. There'll be regular workstream meetings on Mondays, time to be determined. And I would hope that we'll get some form of pilot or proof of concept within this PI. So thank you. So Clare, do you want to say anything before we close?
Well, for me, it is the first time that I'm initiating working in a project within the Mojaloop community. And I really want to thank everybody your time today, also the consideration to engage in this pilot. And we, speaking also for Lola and Dinesh, we're really excited to have the opportunity to engage, bringing to a community where we have had very limited discussions on the benefits of the LEI and explore that together. So we have a lot to learn from you, and we're very grateful to you for your patience as well, where we ask questions and need some guidance from you as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clare. Any closing comments, Arunjay, before we start?
I just like to echo Claire's comments, and really, I think this is very exciting, and really looking forward to making progress in this PI in the next quarter.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you to Claire. Thank you to Arunjay and the entire Glyph team. And thank you to everyone who attended today. I'll put the recording of the session up later on today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.